I didn't sleep the night my brother announced my engagement gift to the entire room was finally stepping up for once. I just stood there, holding a glass of sparkling water I hadn't touched, while 70 people turned to look at me. The rehearsal dinner was still going, the string quartet was still playing, and my brother, my older brother, Daniel was laughing like he'd just told the funniest joke of his life. I didn't cry. I didn't say a word. I set my glass down on the nearest table, picked up my clutch, and walked out through the side door into the parking lot. The night air was cold for April. I sat in my car for 11 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my dashboard the entire time. And when those 11 minutes were up, I made a decision that would take everything Daniel thought he had and leave him with nothing he hadn't earned himself. Let me go back to the beginning, because the beginning matters more than people think. My name is Maya. I'm 32 years old. I'm a licensed structural engineer, and I own a small consulting firm that I built from nothing over the past 6 years. My brother Daniel is 38. He's always been the one our family called the charming one. The one with the big personality, the loud laugh, the room-filling energy. Growing up, he was the sun, and I was whatever planet nobody remembered the name of. Our parents divorced when I was 9 and Daniel was 15. Our mother raised us after that, working 2 jobs and doing everything she could. Daniel was already halfway out the door by then. Football games, friends, a social life I was too young to understand. I was the one who sat with Mom at the kitchen table while she sorted bills. I was the one who learned, very young, what it meant when the numbers didn't add up. Maybe that's why I became an engineer. I've always been good at seeing how structures hold together and seeing exactly where they're about to fail. I started my firm, Ironwood Consulting, when I was 26. The first 2 years were brutal. I was working out of a 1-bedroom apartment, taking every contract I could get, billing 60-hour weeks just to keep the lights on. By 28, I had 4 employees. By 30, I had a real office, a real team, and enough stability to breathe. Daniel, by comparison, had spent those same years cycling through business ideas that never quite landed. A sports bar that closed after 14 months. A wholesale sneaker reselling operation that ended in a dispute with his partner. A food truck he sold at a loss. Each time, he had a reason, an excuse, a story about bad luck and bad timing, and how he was actually this close to making it work. I never judged him for it. I told myself that some people just need more time to find their footing. I believed that because I wanted to believe it, and because it was easier than the alternative. The first time I helped him financially was 4 years ago. He called me on a Tuesday morning, voice low, clearly embarrassed. His landlord was threatening to evict him, and his then-girlfriend, Priya, over 2 months of unpaid rent. He needed $4,000. He said he'd pay me back by the end of the month. He had a contract coming through. It was basically guaranteed. He just needed a bridge. I transferred the money that same day. The contract didn't come through. He didn't bring it up, and I didn't push. I just filed it away in the part of my mind where I kept things I'd decided not to look at directly. 3 months later, Priya called me. I barely knew her at the time. We'd met twice at family dinners. But she called me directly, not Daniel, because Daniel had told her to. His car was being repossessed unless he paid the outstanding balance by Friday. Could I help? I helped. I'm not going to list every instance over the 4 years that followed, because there were too many, and because listing them would take longer than it took me to recover from them. What I will tell you is that the total, across 4 years, was just over $94,000. I kept a spreadsheet. I always keep a spreadsheet. What Daniel and Priya never knew, what I never told them, was how the money actually moved. I had set up a small holding structure through my firm's accountant early on, initially for tax purposes. Over time, I started routing the support payments through it. Their rent payments cleared through an account they thought was connected to some kind of family trust our mother had vaguely mentioned years ago. The car lease Priya drove was titled under one of my firm's subsidiaries with a nominal lease arrangement she never questioned. Daniel thought the landlord had just cut them a deal on their apartment in Brookfield because of a connection through Mom's old neighborhood. He never looked closer. Neither did Priya. People don't interrogate good luck, they just accept it. My accountant, a meticulous woman named Gloria who has worked with me since year 1, was the only person who knew the full picture. She counseled me twice, gently but clearly, that I was creating a dependency I would eventually regret. Both times I told her I understood. Both times I kept going. The reason I never told Daniel directly was complicated and, I'll admit now, not entirely rational. Part of it was that I didn't want him to feel humiliated. He was proud. If he knew the rent he'd been paying for 3 years was actually being subsidized by his little sister, it would have broken something between us, or so I thought. Part of it was that I kept believing he was close to turning a corner. Every few months he had a new plan, new momentum, new energy, and I told myself that if I could just keep things stable a little longer, he'd get there on his own. And honestly, part of it was that I liked being the one who could. I had built something real, and quietly holding everything together was its own kind of satisfaction. A private one. A small, secret pride that I carried alone. I should have known that secrets carried alone have a weight that grows. Daniel got engaged to Priya 14 months ago. When he called to tell me, he was happier than I'd heard him in years, and that happiness was real, I could hear it. I was genuinely glad for them. I told him so. What I did not anticipate was how the wedding planning would change things. The venue Priya wanted was a full-service estate outside the city, the kind of place with a cobblestone driveway and a bridal suite with a soaking tub. The cost for their guest count was $68,000. Daniel called me 2 weeks after they'd toured it. "I know it's a lot," he said, "but this is Priya's dream, Maya. She's had this vision her whole life. And honestly, with everything stabilizing for us, I think we can make it work. I just need a bridge loan to cover the deposit while my investment clears up." I asked him what investment. He told me about a real estate syndication deal he'd gotten into with 2 partners from his gym. He was putting in $40,000, which he expected to return triple within 18 months. I asked where the $40,000 came from. There was a pause. "I've been saving," he said. I didn't respond to that immediately. I was doing the math in my head. I knew exactly what came in and what went out of the accounts I was indirectly supporting. There was no $40,000 in savings. There was barely $4,000. "Daniel," I said, "I can't help with the venue deposit right now." The silence on his end was different from his usual silences. It had an edge to it. "Okay," he said, "just that," and he hung up. I assumed we'd talk again in a few days, once he had time to recalibrate, but the call never came. Over the following weeks, I noticed small things. He didn't respond to a text I sent about Mom's birthday dinner. Priya stopped liking my posts on Instagram, which she'd always done reflexively. When I showed up to Mom's house for Sunday lunch, the 2 of them were there, and the conversation was perfectly cordial and completely hollow. Something had shifted. I couldn't name it precisely, but I felt it. Then came the rehearsal dinner. The venue was a private room at a restaurant in the city, beautiful, warm-lit, with long family-style tables and flowers everywhere. Their families, old family friends, the wedding party. 70 people total. I had come alone. I'd bought Daniel and Priya a honeymoon experience package, a full week at a resort in Street Lucia, including private excursions. I'd had it wrapped beautifully and left it on the gift table near the entrance. Everything was fine until Daniel stood up to speak. He thanked their parents. He thanked their friends. He told a story about how he and Priya met. People laughed in the right places. It was warm and genuinely lovely, and I felt the tension in my shoulders start to ease. And then he looked at me. "And then there's my sister Maya," he said, his voice carrying that particular tone I now recognize as the one he uses when he wants to sound casual while being deliberate. "Who, after years of us all wondering when she'd finally step up for the family, has apparently decided to gift us a vacation." He paused, smiled. "Better late than never, right?" The laughter that followed was confused and scattered. Some people didn't know how to react. Others laughed because Daniel was laughing, and he had that gift, the ability to make a room follow his lead. I heard the words "better late than never," and something in my chest went very still. I set my glass down. I picked up my clutch. I walked out. I sat in my car for those 11 minutes, and then I drove home, went to my home office, opened my laptop, and started a document I titled simply, "Next Steps." The first call I made was to Gloria at 8 o'clock the next morning. I walked her through what I wanted to do. She listened without interrupting. which is how I know she understood the gravity of it. The lease on Priya's car was held through my subsidiary. Terminating it was, within the terms of the agreement, there was a 60-day notice clause for business restructuring, which Gloria had built in years ago at my instruction, though I had never once imagined I would use it. I used it. The apartment in Brookfield was a more delicate matter. Daniel and Priya were listed as the tenants on a lease with a property management company. What they didn't know was that the property management company had a silent funding agreement with a holding entity that I controlled. I had effectively been subsidizing a below-market rent arrangement for 3 years. I notified the holding entity to dissolve the arrangement at the next lease renewal, which was in 49 days. Their rent would adjust to market rate at renewal, which was $1,100 a month more than they were currently paying. The investment Daniel had made with his gym partners, the $40,000 he claimed to have saved, I'd done some quiet asking around through a mutual contact. The money had come from a line of credit he'd opened using Priya's income as collateral, without fully disclosing the terms to her. That wasn't something I could fix for him, but I could make sure I wasn't cushioning the landing when it collapsed. I also called the gift concierge at the resort in Street, Lucia, and converted the honeymoon package into a credit in my name, citing a change in recipient circumstances. They were gracious about it. I didn't do any of this in anger. I want to be clear about that. By the time I was executing each step, I was calm in the way that I'm calm when I'm solving a complex load-bearing problem at work. I was looking at the structure. I was identifying what I had been holding up. And I was deciding, methodically, to stop holding it. The next 2 weeks were quiet on my end. I went to work. I had dinner with a friend. I called my mother to check in carefully, not mentioning any of it, because she was in the position of loving both of us, and I had no desire to make her choose. The first signal that things were shifting reached me through my mother, who called on a Thursday evening sounding confused. "Daniel came by today," she said. "He seemed upset about something with his apartment. He said there was some issue with the lease. He was asking if I knew anything about a holding company or a trust that had something to do with the building." I told her I didn't know the details of his lease arrangements. She was quiet for a moment. "Maya, is there something I should know?" "Daniel and I are working through some things," I said. "It'll sort itself out." She didn't push. She trusted me, which made me feel the particular weight of what I was carrying. 4 days before the wedding, Daniel called me. The caller ID lit up my phone while I was reviewing blueprints at my desk. I let it go to voicemail. His message lasted 3 minutes and 40 seconds. The first minute was controlled. He'd gotten a notice about the car. He wanted to know what was going on. There must be some mistake. Could I call him back? The second minute was less controlled. Something about how he'd always known I was passive-aggressive, how I was doing this on purpose, how I'd always resented him for reasons he couldn't understand. The third minute broke open. His voice dropped. He said he knew, now, that I had been the one paying for things. Priya had found something, a document in his email, a forwarded statement he hadn't caught, something, and she had sat him down and they had gone through everything together. He said the word everything, like it cost him something to say it. "I didn't know," he said. "I really didn't know the full picture, Maya. And I don't know how to even..." The voicemail cut off there. The 3 minutes and 40 seconds had run out. I sat with the phone face down on my desk for a long time. Then I picked it up and called Gloria. I asked her to pause the lease adjustment, not cancel, just pause to give me time to think. She said she already had. She'd been waiting for my call. I thought about what Daniel had said at that rehearsal dinner. Better late than never. 70 people. The string quartet still playing. And his face, that particular combination of entitlement and performance that I had spent my entire adult life working around instead of addressing directly. I thought about the comment one of my friends had made years ago, when I first started helping Daniel without telling him. She'd said, "You're not protecting him. You're protecting yourself from having to have the hard conversation." She was right. She had been right the whole time. I called Daniel back that evening. He picked up on the first ring. "I need you to listen," I said. "Not respond. Just listen." He said okay. I told him everything. All of it. Not the amounts, first the why. I told him that I had started helping because I loved him and I didn't want to watch him fail. I told him that I had continued helping because I was afraid of the version of our relationship where I told the truth. I told him that his comment at the rehearsal dinner had not been a small thing, that I had sat in a parking lot for 11 minutes and felt something close inside me that I hadn't been able to reopen since. I told him that the support was ending not out of punishment, but because continuing it would hurt both of us more than stopping would. And then I told him the numbers, all $94,000 of them, broken down by year. He didn't say anything for a long time after I finished. When he spoke, his voice was different from anything I'd heard from him before, stripped of the performance. Just his actual voice, quiet and unsteady. "I didn't know it was you," he said. "I really didn't. I thought I don't know what I thought. I thought things just somehow worked out." "I know," I said. "The things I said at dinner. I know. Maya, He stopped. Started again. "I'm sorry. I am genuinely, deeply sorry. Not just for the dinner, for all of it. For never asking. For not looking closer." I believed him. That was the hardest part, that I believed him, and it didn't automatically fix anything. The wedding happened 3 days later. I went. I sat near the back. Priya was beautiful. Daniel cried when she walked down the aisle. Real tears. The kind that don't perform well. During the reception, he found me at my table. He sat down next to me and didn't say anything for a moment. "I talked to Priya," he said finally. "We're going to figure out the apartment ourselves. And the car will manage." He paused. "She's actually relieved, I think, to know what was real." I nodded. "I also," he said, and stopped again. Choosing his words carefully, "I talked to someone. A therapist. First session is next week." He looked at me sideways. "Don't make a big deal of it." "I'm not making a big deal of it," I said. "You're smiling." "I'm not smiling." "You're a little bit smiling." I was a little bit smiling. We didn't hug. We didn't suddenly become different people. But we sat together at that table for an hour, talking about nothing important, our mother, a TV show we'd both apparently been watching without knowing it, the food, and for the first time in longer than I can precisely calculate, it felt like two people who actually knew each other. What I understand now that I didn't understand 4 years ago is that holding everything together in secret is not generosity. It's control dressed up as love. I told myself I was protecting Daniel. I was protecting the idea of us that I'd built in my head, the version where he was fine, where everything was fine, where I was quietly keeping the whole structure standing and no one needed to know. But structures built on hidden load-bearing elements fail in particular ways. The collapse looks sudden to everyone on the outside. To the engineer, it was always inevitable. I am not the villain of this story. I am also not the hero. I am someone who loved imperfectly, held on too long, and finally let go, not with fury, but with the quiet, determined clarity of someone who has done the math and decided, at last, to build something honest. My firm is doing well. My mother is fine. Daniel and Priya are renting a smaller apartment on the east side of the city, driving one car between them, and by all accounts figuring it out. And I am sleeping better than I have in 4 years. Not because I won, but because I stopped pretending there was nothing to lose.